Hello, it is Sunday, August 11th, 2024, and this is Political Dharma with Alan Zundel. I'm going to be focusing today on independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. No surprise there because I often do focus on him. Been interested in the presidential race from the standpoint of independent and minor party candidates, and Kennedy seems to be the one getting the most traction this presidential year. So I'm going to be talking about his ballot access progress, which is the main thing they've been focusing on for the last many months, and then where he's going to go from here once that process is completed, as it soon will be. So let me first apologize for the very bland decor behind me, and it might be a little distracting when you see the thermostat on one side of my head there, and the hanger on the door on the other side, framing my head like that. But I just had our furniture delivered 2 days ago on Friday and set up my computer quickly so I could do this show. And I hope to have a better backdrop for you as the weeks proceed and I'm able to unpack all these boxes and set up our household and then turn more towards this show. I'm eager to get to that for you, but let's turn first of all to Kennedy and how he's doing on ballot access in Maryland. He was able to get the signatures in by the deadline Monday. He got in 26,000 of the 10,000 required. And remember that when Kennedy does signatures, they have an independent validation company that rakes over these signatures for any problems before they turn them into the state. So more than 2.5 times as many signatures already scrutinized by their own company. So I have no doubt they'll be on the ballot in Maryland, barring any successful legal challenges to kick them off the ballot, which doesn't seem too promising, and I'll get to that in a minute. And the Green Party was also able to turn in enough signatures by the deadline. They turned in 16,727 out of that required 10,000. So both of them made progress, both Kennedy and the Green Party. And then the Kennedy campaign, that last news report, for those of you who are just listening, was from Maryland Matters online newspaper. This is from the Kennedy Shanahan website. They also turned in plenty enough signatures to get on the ballot in South Dakota and Wisconsin. And as the headline says, they were officially certified in Vermont, which is different than getting enough signatures in. It means the state has scrutinized those signatures and approved them. And then in the District of Columbia, which is the national capital where the White House and the Capitol building, the Congress meets there. Only Kennedy got in the signatures for the District of Columbia, so it looks like he'll be the only one on the ballot other than the Democratic and Republican candidates and the Green candidate. Now, back in 2020, the District of Columbia lowered its very severe threshold for signatures that year only due to the COVID pandemic. Green Party, Libertarian Party were able to get on. Green Party has maintained that, but the Libertarian Party lost its ballot access in 2022 because they didn't get enough votes in that election. So they will not have their candidate on the ballot in D.C. There's only 3 electoral votes at stake there, but in a close election, those 3 votes could matter. I mentioned that in Vermont, the Kennedy campaign had its ballot certified, its ballot access certified. This is also true in a few other states. For example, according to the Kennedy campaign, in Colorado, Iowa, and as I said, Vermont, they've all been certified this week. And according to Ballot Access News, in Texas, a very difficult state to get ballot access in, Texas Secretary of State said that Kennedy's petition is valid. So that's a big one. He will be on the ballot in Texas. The only other big one outstanding is in New York. There are still challenges going on towards Kennedy's ballot access in various states where he already turned in signatures. Let us turn to those now. First of all, New Jersey was a win earlier this week. Let's see, what day was that? I think Tuesday. New Jersey administrative law judge said that Kennedy was not a quote-unquote sore loser because he didn't file for or submit a nomination petition for the Democratic primary for the presidential nomination in New Jersey, meaning the argument against him in New Jersey, as well as in some other states, was that Kennedy was violating a sore loser law because he ran for and lost the Democratic nomination and then tried to get on the ballot as an independent candidate. Well, this particular administrative law judge says that no, he didn't even file to run in the primary in New Jersey, so that doesn't apply. And in fact, the very next day, the New Jersey Secretary of State confirmed, this is from the Associated Press, they confirmed that yes, that indeed they're going to put Kennedy on the ballot. So Secretary of State certified them for New Jersey. That legal challenge has been adequately met. Now, the big one this week is in New York City, and this is according to ABC News and a few other sources like Associated Press and Ballot Access News. In New York, which is a big one, the Albany County Supreme Court held a hearing on this challenge to Kennedy's ballot access. This was brought by Clear Choice Political Action Committee, which is closely affiliated with people who have been highly involved in the Democratic Party. They claim that Kennedy is not a resident of New York because they brought witnesses to say that even though Kennedy had stayed at their home in the last few years, he was not a tenant. And in the one situation where Kennedy said he was paying rent, the witness said that he had been paying $500 a month for a room in New York. That seems pretty cheap to me. But he only started paying after a news article questioned his residency, and at the same time, he paid a year back rent of $6,000. So they were questioning whether this, was just an attempt to get around residency laws. But on the other side, the Kennedy campaign is arguing that he does pay taxes in New York. He has various licenses, like his falconry and driver's licenses. He's registered to vote in New York. He gets mail at his address, and he keeps clothes there. But in the ordinary person's mind, and when you see news reports, you think, yeah, well, it's cut and dried. He's been spending his nights with his wife in their home in California, and he's got clothes there. He eats his meals there. He goes there often. So you think, well, that's where he's a resident, right? His physical body is there with his family, sleeping and eating there. But, the laws about residency are quite a bit more complex. And the constitutional requirement about presidential residency is even more stringent. And that's because when they wrote the Constitution, I haven't checked this out for myself. I'm relying here on other people's reports. It would be easy enough to do, but I haven't had the time to do. I haven't taken the time to do that. But I do remember that back when they wrote the Constitution, travel was difficult. So for a lot of folks running for office, they would have to travel for weeks at a time to get to wherever the capital was. I think it was in Pennsylvania for a while, maybe New York before Washington, D.C. Anyway, you had to travel a long way. So the requirement for residency was where you intended to return, right? Where you kept a place you were intending to go back to. And this is what Kennedy has also said, that when his wife retires from acting, they want to move to New York. Why not? So anyway, the case wrapped up on Friday, and we should be hearing a judgment in New York around Monday. So sometime next week, that case will be determined. Do we have anything else about ballot challenges? No, just there's a couple more outstanding that I know of. One in Pennsylvania, which is also about residency, and one in Illinois, and I forget the grounds for that one. So there's a few cases outstanding, but so far Kennedy has been successful, as far as I know, in meeting every challenge that's come up. Let's put this in the more accurate frame, which is he hasn't lost the ballot access case yet. There's still some outstanding, but he's won in Hawaii. Where's my list? Hawaii, Idaho, New Jersey, just recently, North Carolina, Vermont, and so he's on a winning streak there. All wins, no losses. If we look at the overall picture, and I've been spending a little time trying to update these after a long time away from my computer, we see here now, of course, there's 50 states in the United States. When you add the District of Columbia, that's 51 potential places where you can get ballot access. The Republican and Democratic parties are on the ballot in all 51. As you see, RFK Jr. is now at 46 states. 45 states plus the District of Columbia brings him to 46. That means just 5 more states that he needs to meet the signature requirements to get on the ballot. And he's pulled way ahead of the Libertarian Party, which by my count is about on 37 ballots. Green Party is about on 29, and the others down there at the bottom, Constitution Party, 15, Cornel West, another independent candidate, on 13. So Kennedy's way ahead of any of these other independent candidates or third parties. And if we look at our deadlines that they have to meet in order to get on the ballot, as you can see here, going from March of this year all the way to September, March was the earliest deadline for qualifying for a ballot, and September 6th is the latest deadline. You look down the Kennedy column there, the third one from the left, and you see in every single state he's met the deadline all the way up through August 16th. Every state he's on the ballot, either by turning in signatures or paying the filing fee or becoming the nominee of a small party or getting his own We the People party on the ballot. On this chart, in some of those cases, I just put an X and haven't filled in whether or not it was a filing fee or an independent party that put him in the nomination, because I haven't checked that out for the most recent successes in his ballot access cases. The only 5 states that are outstanding, you see there in the right side, I've highlighted them in yellow for you. He's got Arizona, and the deadline for that is August 17th, which I think is just about a week from now. So that would be Saturday, I believe. And then after that, August 26th, a couple of weeks away, is Wyoming. And then on September, he's got several already in the bag. And then finally, September 6th, he's got Kentucky, Mississippi, and Rhode Island. So it looks like he's got plenty of time to get those ones finished up and in as well. And I do expect at this point Kennedy to be on the ballot in all 50 states, plus the District of Columbia, as he often promised he was going to do. Well, what that means is that unless he loses an important case such as New York, and he's still got time to bring legal challenges, and I don't think the grounds for the challenge are very sound. It may turn out that there's a long fight over him ultimately getting on the ballot anyway, but it's worth it to the Democrats to drain his resources of volunteers, time, money, to keep bringing these challenges and try to keep him from being able to present a more formidable challenge in the actual campaign season as it gears up. And it's just starting to happen now with the Democratic convention coming up and people turning more and more towards watching the news about the presidential race. What's next for Kennedy now that looks like he's going to be on the ballot in all 50 states plus the District of Columbia? That's where they've been putting their focus. I would expect now that they're going to start raising money in order to do a more full-scale political campaign. Now, this is important. They're going to have to, for one thing, get their polling numbers up, because to get into the debate, and there was a news story this week that Donald Trump recommitted to the September 10th debate on the American Broadcasting Network, ABC, with Kamala Harris. Now, he had backed out when the candidate for the Republican Party, the candidate for the Democratic Party was switched from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris. Donald Trump backed out of that debate, but then I guess he took some heat for that and decided, no, well, he's going to be in again. Now, the reason I bring that up is because if the September 10th debate is on, and those two candidates, major party candidates, are talking about agreeing to more debates in the future, if Kennedy can get in that debate, it would be the most important thing for him in terms of his ability to run a significant campaign and have any possibility of winning the presidential election. So he's going to have to get it. He's already met several requirements that they've already stated for being in the debate. First of all, he meets the constitutional requirements for being eligible to hold the office. Second, he's going to be on plenty enough ballots to get that hypothetical majority in the Electoral College. I mean, virtually all the states, I assume, at this point. And then the only other thing, he's got to get in 4 qualifying polls. He's got to get his numbers up to at least 15%. And a lot of news reports have been making hay out of the apparent fact that is there such a thing as an apparent fact? Well, anyway, the apparent drop in his polls from where he was getting around 15%, sometimes lower, sometimes a little higher, like 12 to 19%. But he was close to meeting those requirements when they refused to put him in the earlier debate, the one that Joe Biden screwed up so royally that he ended up having to drop out. If he can get his numbers up, that's the final requirement that he needs to meet, and they will have no excuse for keeping him out of the debate. So what he needs to do is get into the attention of many more people than he has been getting into so far, and lift his public profile, and especially the platform he's running on. What I've noticed is that he is progressing with his plan for raising money with his so-called Victory Fund. It's a joint agreement with the Libertarian Party to have him partner with them so that he could accept larger donations to the Libertarian Party, because it's a party and not just an independent candidate. And then the Libertarian Party has agreed to kick back some of those funds to promoting Kennedy's campaign and keep some for themselves. They need the money. He needs the money, so they have this arrangement. There's been a lot of dissension within the Libertarian Party over that, but the Judicial Committee of the Libertarian Party this week made a determination that it was well within the power of the Libertarian Party National Committee to make this agreement, so they're upholding it. Looks like it's going to go forward with no problem from the Libertarian side. And then the Kennedy campaign announced that it was expanding that concept that it had with the National Libertarian Party to include also the Libertarian parties of Florida and Colorado, as well as the American Independent Party of California. So he's expanding this concept of raising money through these types of victory funds, where he partners up with a political party in order to get larger donations that he then splits with them according to some formula that really favors Kennedy, but also helps these minor parties that have a lot of trouble raising that kind of money. 10% of what Kennedy could raise would be a lot of money to most minor parties, especially those who are just state parties as opposed to national parties. So if he can raise money, which it looks like he's still at work doing, there's been a lot of media articles about how his campaign has been kind of on the wane, that he hasn't been campaigning a lot, that his money numbers are down, that his poll numbers are down. And the thrust of those is to say, well, he's not, he's kind of on the downswing, and that's going to be it for Kennedy. I doubt if that's the case. If I were running his campaign, which I'm not, I don't even think they're listening to this podcast to my knowledge, but if I were running his campaign, what I would be doing is laying low while all the attention is on the Republican and Democratic Party conventions, especially with all the excitement among Democrats and among the media over Kamala Harris's sudden entrance into the race as the Democratic nominee, and all the excitement over that. All that, I would expect, is going to wear off over time. The media is going to be looking for other types of stories to cover, and it's going to gradually come out that Kamala Harris actually is not everything everybody expects her to be, because she's a blank slate to most citizens of the United States right now. They don't know much about her, even though she's been vice president for the last 3.5 years or so. They don't know a lot about her positions, and she really is very analogous to Joe Biden in a lot of ways. She's a kind of finger in the wind politician that will change her positions, but not really cross her donor class. That's my take on her anyway. And as I move forward into this election season, I hope to be able to spend more time going into policy positions, my own views of them and of the various candidates that seem to have some kind of shot at making a difference in this race. But for now, I will say that I think media attention is going to move off from the supposed excitement and enthusiasm around the Harris and Walz ticket. She just named her vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz of Minnesota. So there's a lot of excitement around that in the media, and that's what they're paying attention to. But that's going to die down, and then Kennedy's going to, I assume, do something to suddenly regain the stage. Now, I've seen a lot of media hits on him, and in this last week there's been several. For one thing, the New Yorker just published a long piece about Kennedy, which rehashes all this familiar stuff, focusing on his embrace, his so-called an embrace of an oddball status. And they, of course, emphasize things like his brainworm story or his takes on vaccines and his going barefoot into airports and airplanes. And of course, his this bear story was the only new thing in the whole New Yorker article, how he had found a dead bear on the road and ended up taking it at Central Park. I'm sure you've heard the story by now. Well, it's kind of an amusing story, but it also, since Kennedy was already a mature man, 60 years old, you would think this would cast some doubt on his judgment. And legitimately, I would say, at 60, I probably wouldn't have even thought of trying to pull a stunt like that. But I don't have the kind of money to buy myself out of any jams I might get into. Anyway, so they're focusing on this, that Kennedy's an oddball, he does these weird things. But are we focusing on the other candidates or just on Kennedy in that sense? Is Donald Trump somebody you would regard as a completely normal human being with very mature judgments in all areas of his life? Well, I wouldn't. And Kamala Harris, we don't know that much about her yet. Some of us do, many of us don't. And I think you can find plenty of things in her political career and her personal life, although I hate to go into people's personal lives. Apparently the media doesn't mind doing that. Kamala Harris, she does have a lot of questionable activity in her past as well. Who doesn't? I certainly do. We all do. So they haven't focused on that yet. When the media gets around to that, if they do, I hope they do, somebody will, at least the media aligned with the Republican Party, they're going to start finding things in her that would cause you to question her judgment as well and her character in various ways, especially as it pertains to how she would function in office. So the comparison is not out there yet, but they're focusing on Kennedy and his so-called flaws and his questions of judgment, the waning of his campaign supposedly, and I think he's just storing up his gunpowder to keep it dry for the time where it really becomes important. And then there's this John Oliver video segment on his TV show last week tonight. He did a longish, like a half an hour segment, comedy segment, but serious, criticizing Kennedy in a variety of ways. And I thought it was kind of devastating if this is all you knew about Kennedy, because again, they focus on things like vaccines and his whole history of that and the odd things he's done or said. But what they don't do, none of these articles seem to focus on his actual policy platform. What is he really running on? Why does he run? They don't talk about how odd it is that he wants to reduce the military budget. They don't talk about how odd it is that he wants to get corporate influence out of government decisions. They don't talk about how he thinks that we need to bridge the divides between this increasingly divided country along partisan lines. Why don't they focus on those things? Instead, they seem to focus on these odd things about Kennedy and not focus on the very odd things that you're going to find about Trump, for example, and probably Kamala Harris as well. Let me tell you, there's odd things in my background. So my take on this is that the media is still out to paint Kennedy as somebody who's going to be irrelevant and eccentric, and they want people to believe that. But I think what the Kennedy campaign is doing is keeping ready for the moment when there's a little bit of pause in the news cycle and they want something new to talk about when people get tired of hearing about Kamala Harris and start learning some more things about her that cause them to question whether this is really such a big difference from Joe Biden other than the age factor, which granted was a big one in people's minds. And they're going to start turning, and Kennedy's got things prepared. He's going to do something. That's my expectation. We'll see if I'm right or I'm wrong. This coming week, what we got coming up is the Green Party Convention, Thursday, August 15th through Sunday, August 18th. If you got any sources on what's going on inside the Green Party, please let me know. I'd like to know if anything important is happening. I do know that they're going to nominate Jill Stein, who was their candidate twice before in 2012 and 2016, and she's going to pick her vice presidential candidate. I don't think that's going to get a lot of national attention because really she's not going to, well, maybe she will. I don't want to make predictions. I try to stay away from predictions. It's going to be very hard for her to make a big impact on this race. I hope she does, really. I sincerely do. But not going to be a lot of attention on the Green Party. I'd like to know more about what's going on in there. And the Democratic Party convention is coming up the next week, Monday, August 19th through Thursday, August 22nd. And I will have some things to say about them. Uncharacteristic for me, I'm going to focus a little bit on what happened in the Democratic Party leading up to this nomination at their convention, because I saw, and I didn't yet read, an interesting article from Seymour Hersh about why Biden actually dropped out of the race, having to do with the threat to invoke the 25th Amendment to push him out of office because he was not able to handle the duties. I don't know if that's true or not. I have to read up on it, find out what it's about, but I'll be talking more about that next week, as well as whatever else comes up in the world of alternative party candidates. So thanks again for watching. If you want to help support this channel, you can go to politicaldharma.com to make a one-time donation. Thank you very much to those of you who have. Or you can go to my Patreon account, patreon.com/politicaldharma. You can find links to both of these somewhere on this page where you're watching me talk this. If you're watching YouTube, I think it's also, I also put them on Rumble. I'm not sure if I've done that. Anyway, you can give a monthly small donation on Patreon, and I'll soon be putting these videos up without any commercials, so you can watch that there if you become a Patreon member. What else? I think that's about it for this week. Something's in the back of my head. Oh yeah, what I wanted to say is I'm on YouTube and Rumble and various audio podcasts like Spotify and Apple and the rest. And also you can watch my videos on my Patreon account. So that's it for this week. Hope you come back again next week. And I hope I have a better backdrop for you and have a little more to say about some interesting things. Bye.
With ease, I see the chains are breaking. We gained our focus, the moves we're making will prove to determine our self-worth as a passenger on this vehicle Earth.